seems like there's a lot of energy already in the building, so that's a good sign. And you are right to be full of energy and excitement tonight because I told the students, the freshmen I think, that this is going to be the wildest ride since the Avengers Endgame. So, and the nice thing is that you didn't have to pay me, but it's worth billions of dollars. So, welcome to the 7th annual Greyfriars Classical Academy Senior Thesis Presentations. I'm Neidin Johnson, the Senior Thesis Instructor. Let me kind of give you a brief look forward into what you're going to be experiencing tonight. So, a long time ago, about 8 or 9 months ago, 7 students embarked on a perilous journey, an epic quest. And they had one goal, and the goal was to formulate a unique and persuasive and nuanced claim. One that they couldn't pilfer from a single book, one that they couldn't take from the bedtime stories their parents told them growing up. No, one that they actually had to come up with themselves. And that's actually a really tough task. And they learned pretty quickly that this was going to be a lot of work and that they had to be willing to rethink and read a lot and write and rewrite over and over and over again. But by the end of the process, and this was a process, they have completed a 15 to 20 page persuasive thesis. And now, tonight, they're going to be giving this thesis in speech form up there. And then they're going to be opening themselves up to a bright and ruthless group of panelists who are going to be battering them with questions for another 15 to 20 minutes or so. But they prepared. They really spent their whole life preparing for this. And it's actually essential that we realize that this is not really just a senior thesis presentation, but this is a senior thesis celebration for really who they've become over the last 18, 19 years. And it's really important for us to realize that because this isn't even simply a celebration for all the things that these seniors have done this year, which is very impressive. But it's also a celebration for the work and influence of their teachers for the last 4 years at Greyfriars, of their teachers in K through 8, and most importantly of their parents who have been educating them since birth. And really it's also a celebration of the work that the Lord's done. The Lord's done in our school and in the lives of these stellar seniors. And I think that you're going to see as they come up here why we even have them do this senior thesis thing. But just in case you were curious, I'll give you a little background. You also have a little explanation on the back of your nifty program there. But you don't have to read that now. You actually don't have to read it ever. But this is why we do a senior thesis. So we're a classical school, and classical school means a couple things. One, it means we read dead people. Lots and lots of dead people. Well, at least what they wrote. We don't actually read people. But what really classical means is that we are committed to a type of education that has a specific goal. So the type of education we're committed to is the training in developing whole human beings. And they've been doing that since kindergarten, but the high school specifically emphasizes this idea of rhetoric, which is the ability to think about important ideas and then communicate those important ideas in a compelling way for the sake of other people, for other people's good. And that's what something I've been kind of encouraging them through this whole process. Think about you guys. You're the audience. How are they going to serve you by what they're doing up here? And our hope is that if they can learn to do that, which I think they can learn to do that with a senior thesis project, they can learn to do that with their entire lives. Because that's really the end goal of classical education, is to form whole human beings who can go out into the world and who can serve God's church and love God's people, spread God's gospel, and then die, and then enjoy their eternal reward. That's really what we're after at Greyfriars. And I think what you're going to sense is that when these students come up here, give their thesis, that you're going to be really excited that they're going to go out in the world. And you're going to be really confident that God's going to use them for that precise thing. So that's why it's really a celebration. It's a celebration of the work the Lord's already done, and it's a celebration of the work that we're confident the Lord's going to continue to do for the rest of their lives. So, before we get going, a few things are in order. First, big thanks to our Senior Thesis Advisors. So these are the unsung heroes. They're the ones who don't get paid, don't get much notoriety, but spend countless hours working with their senior on the thesis, from the very germ of the idea at the beginning all the way to the final product. And if you ask any of these seniors, and they were to pick one person who's been the greatest influence on their thesis, I'm guessing they would probably say their advisor. You can find in the back the names of all those advisors. Give them a high five, buy them a drink, I don't know. But it's worth celebrating the work that they've done this year with these seniors. Also, special thanks to parents of the seniors. One for being the product of all these wonderful people, or they're the product of you. You created a great product. This is getting awkward. But also, a more practical thank you. The senior thesis students' parents were the ones who prepared the reception for us. So don't leave after this is all done. You're going to be feasting on wonderful ideas for the next couple hours. But then we have feasting on wonderful food, which is great too. And you'll see many other things on the back of your program. Thanks also to the panelists today and tomorrow, and to Tristan Trice, who's actually not in the back of the program, but he's doing sound today, and he's an all-star. So with that, let's pray, and then let's get going. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. The fact that we are here today, we as a school are here, and we as each individuals are here, is a testimony to your mercy. It's a testimony to your grace and your benevolence. It's a testimony to your mysterious joy that overflows in abundance and love. We thank you for how much you have taught us through your word, through old books written by dead people, and even through students. We thank you for how you speak to us in your world, through your people. And we pray that tonight we would all learn, and we would all come a little bit closer to grasping at the truth and the goodness and beauty of who you are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
For being here tonight to support me and my classmates. Your presence tonight is a joy for all of us, but your endless support throughout this whole process has been invaluable. In specific, I would like to thank my dear advisor, Anna Cranford. Thank you for reading over my drafts and giving me feedback. But even more so, thank you for chatting with me about life and letting me infuse your wisdom into my work. Secondly, I am indebted to my friend Laura McCauley and her parents for their endless hours of editing and for helping me to reduce the amount of times I use the conjunction and. Anthony Navarro for working me this week, and of course Mr. Johnson for his guidance throughout. I've loved exploring this concept with you, and you've been a source of encouragement for all of us. Thank you for not letting us be content with our work, but always pushing us further to excellence. Thank you to all of the panelists tonight, Jim Curtis, Michael Cranford, and Anna Cranford. Thank you for taking an evening to listen to us. We appreciate each of you. Lastly, I would like to dedicate this to my dear friend, Laura Pope Navarro, as this is the third anniversary of her homegoing. She instilled a love of learning in me, but more importantly, she taught me what it looked like to be a courageous, curious, and compassionate Christian. I sincerely hope she is honored tonight, and I owe this in large part to her. With that, let's begin. On a Friday in February, President Donald Trump announced a matter that would invoke national controversy. America was in a state of emergency. It was not long before the president became an object of critique within the media. The Atlantic spoke to the fact that, even by the standards of this president, his remarks were confusing, untruthful, and often off-topic, with strange ad hominem attacks on other politicians and sharp exchanges with reporters. One particular individual who critiqued the president perhaps most creatively was Alec Baldwin. In a Saturday Night Live skit, the actor railed against the president in a reverent parody. Just as the president had attacked other politicians in his speech, Baldwin assailed Trump's personhood. He mocked his intellect, acting out of nothing but disrespect. As is his typical fashion, President Trump took to Twitter to defend his dignity. It was said in the article, regardless of what you think of President Trump's policies, it must be difficult to be a person of power and be openly mocked. In the face of such disrespect, it would be all too easy to use your platform and hit back. Needless to say, however, this only perpetuates the cycle of retaliation and dehumanizing conflict. As commentator Tim Muehlhoff said, welcome to what Georgetown linguist Deborah Tannen calls the argument culture, where Americans present our disagreements by demonizing and disrespecting those with whom we disagree. There is so much wrong with this picture that it is difficult to discern where even to begin. One fixed truth that is undeniable, though, is that American culture treats every controversy as a chance to attack the other person with complete disregard for their humanity. Every policy, every public decision, every hot-button issue becomes a catalyst for contentious debate. Every citizen is a gladiator, hearing the sound of his own sword. In such a society, it becomes increasingly difficult for anyone to voice his opinion on a polarizing issue without fear of being called out. As Jonathan Haidt notes, social media has channeled partisan passions into the creation of a call-out culture. Anyone can be publicly shamed for saying something well-intentioned that someone else interprets uncharitably. This is especially problematic for Christians, whose views are constantly being condemned for being bigoted and intolerant. Why must it be so difficult to have civil conversations without giving or receiving offense? Many ask if there's even a way to have disagreements without any traces of contempt. Does the church have a solution? Yes, it does. In fact, Christians are the only people who have viable solutions, and therefore have the responsibility to explore and share their findings. While unearthing ways in which the church can practice and promote civility and conversation is the final goal, many matters need to be addressed first. Of primary importance is the exploration of the arenas in which civil conversations has suffered fatal blows. These arenas are the public sphere and education. Secondly, a survey of ways in which the church has failed to address culturally controversial ideas must be addressed by its members. But before either of these two discussions can take place, it is necessary to provide clear definitions of terms that will be used throughout. Terms that may be unclear are the church, high conflict, and perhaps most importantly, civility. Given the context of this speech, the church will be defined as a community of believers at large. This should be taken in the broadest sense. It will refer to the collective identity of sincere Christians, regardless of denomination or group. When people who disagree discuss difficult ideas, high conflict is often inevitable. In a recent conference at Queen's University, noted journalist Amanda Ripley defined high conflict as situations in which conflict begins to reach emotional heights and loses rationality. It becomes a battle of us versus them, good versus evil, and the rules of interaction begin to change. What can be lacking in these situations is civility. As is said on the Civil Politics website, civility is defined as the ability to disagree productively with others, respecting both their sincerity and their decency. By civility, we do not mean agreement. Now that these terms have been addressed, we can explore ways in which civility in communications has been lost and find solutions to these problems. And learning about the roots of surfacing problems and acknowledging its own failures in handling conflict well, the church can think deeply about ways in which it can model compassionate conversations. These conversations must be built on the principles of respect for the image of God and others, well thought out and persuasive views, and a courageous curiosity that will dethrone the fear of views different from our own. Tonight, I seek to assert and advocate that the church is in a unique position to engage culturally controversial ideas. And civility in conversation will only be regained if the church takes up the challenge of learning how to disagree well. In what ways has civility in conversation been lost, and opportunities for constructive conflict been missed? Understanding how both culture and the church have abused the resource of conversation will enable the church to develop a victory plan. Revealing the reasons behind the abuse or neglect of conversation must come before recovery and healing. In addition, learning how differences have been a source of division can provide insight into how disagreements can be held as peaceably, but also as fervently as possible. Before discussing the arena of the public sphere, we first need to delve into the foundations of it. A good place to begin is by asking, what sparked the flames of polarization and animosity in Western culture, in America specifically? It is an undeniable fact that Western culture is built on individualism. Christina Cleveland states that individualism is common in Western cultures, focuses on individuals separate from social context, values internal and private personal attributes, and emphasizes uniqueness, self-expression, individual goals, and direct communication. But this rampant individualism has only led to a widespread loss of purpose and identity that can only be found in community. Our identity no longer lies in intrinsic worth as humans, but in religious, political, and social views. While individuality seeks to erase any semblance of dependency on others and their ideas, community is fundamental to who we are as humans. The attempt to reconcile these two truths is starkly evident in the origins of American nation. Because community was a necessary creation of early colonists, given their differing religious viewpoints and socioeconomic statuses, America was built on partisanship. Devastatingly though, many in our society have come to see partisan politics as their religion, as their identity. Because of the search for identity fostered by individualism, many have clung to politics as their savior. Jonah Goldberg rightfully notes that humans crave what anthropologist Ernest Geller called re-enchantment creeds. When traditional religion gets chased out, we adopt other causes, movements, and ideas to fill the hole in our souls. When partisan politics became a religion, discussions across difficult differences became seen as attacks on personal identity. Now, the media has been the primary agent for exposing and exacerbating this disunity and division within Western culture. The media feeds off of high conflict and has set a precedent that every opposing opinion must be a source of offense. Any attempt to discuss different ideas is done in a spirit of aggression. Judith Rodin poses a crucial question when she asks, is good public discourse possible in a large, fragmented, mass-mediated society? Before moving on, though, it is vitally important to consider a weighty matter. Many hastily attribute hyperpartisanship itself to media coverage. But this is a fallacious blame shift, which actually conceals the truth about the heights of tension in our present age. The media itself has never been and never will be the source of these tensions. It exists only to reflect the political and social tensions that are in existence already. Granted, the media is infamous for its elaborate portrayals of conflicts and tragedies, but it should not be blamed exclusively for creating hyperpartisanship. American culture has decided of its own accord to live in a world where controversial ideas are sources of entertainment. The personhood of those on the other side of any controversial idea is demeaned so that the show may go on. Though our reliance on the media to inform us of what is going on in the public sphere has certainly stunted our ability to communicate across differences, the more insidious breeding ground for indoctrination is the classroom. As Jonathan Haidt laments, in this environment, practically anyone of any age or at any point on the political spectrum could make the case for being anxious, depressed, or outraged. Francis Fukuyama attributes the sources of these sort of issues to the discussion of identity. He says, identity is a theme that underlies many political phenomena today, from new populist movements to the controversies taking place on university campuses. Liberalism has always been searching for a definition of identity distinct from the Christian identity, rooted in the image of God and in accordance with His Word and His will. The most recent way in which liberalism has influenced the arena of education is by promoting intersectionality and safe spaces. These were created to validate newfound identities and suppress oppositional ideas. But in turning controversial values and ideas into individuals' identities, disagreements over these ideas loses all trace of truth, reasonableness, and civility. Education has the ability to train and inspire, yet the current climate of college campuses is cloudy and oppressive due to its overprotective nature and warped sense of identity. Witness the fact that when Ben Shapiro was denied access to speak at Grand Canyon University, itself being a Christian school, it was because allowing him to speak would be detrimental to the school's unique and united community. As Haidt continues, the modern obsession with protecting people from feeling unsafe is one of the several causes of the rapid rates of adolescent depression, anxiety, and suicide. Those who have enforced safe spaces and shunned individuals who would challenge them have ironically stunted human resilience and growth. And they've also shut down the freedom of speech. This in turn has been detrimental to discussing our differences in healthy ways. But because there can be no consensus over the definition of identity within our current education system, it has resolved to brainwash our culture to think that if ideas are being debated, then one's identity is being endangered. Any comment that could be considered offensive in any way is coined hate speech, and every interaction about a culturally controversial topic turns into high conflict, and thus the possibility for civil conversations across differences is grim. Christians are certainly not exempt from failures in handling conflict well, but the failures of the church in dealing with different views is evidenced most profoundly in how the church has attempted to address hot-button issues. There are three misguided and frankly unbiblical approaches that the church has taken when confronting difficult ideas. The first is abrasive condemnation, second, unorthodox tolerance, but third, timid passivity. The first stance the church falls into is a desensitized condemnation of those they disagree with. Westboro Baptist Church's inflammatory picketing against anyone they may find fault in is an infamous example of judging the world for its wrong ideas, but in the vilest way possible. From blaming certain types of sins for natural disasters to railing against homosexuality at the funeral of a child who died from AIDS. Westboro is America's most startling and sickening example of attempting to speak to wrong ideas with abrasive condemnation. Such adamance requires misapplication of Scripture, and it's fueled by hatred. While Westboro's statements of abrasive condemnation are plastered on their website, unorthodox tolerance can be found within the mission statements on the websites of denominations such as the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America. On ideas regarding the LGBTQ movement to abortion and so many others, denominations like the PCUSA take a worldly, relative, but also decidedly unbiblical stance. But what about the churches that don't fall into either of these extremes? The majority of churches that don't side with either of these radical views choose to sit in silence or stand up only to be met with conflicting convictions. Many within such churches can fall into the trap of believing that they are in the clear because they do not fall into either of these extremes. But upon closer examination, it becomes apparent that many in the church actually refrain from engaging with difficult ideas and difficult people altogether. Christians often live their lives discussing these ideas with people they agree with, but fail to confront the reality of those in the world and those who hold to them. When Christians realize that they should start engaging with ideas and people with whom they disagree, they are often paralyzed because they do not know how to articulate their own views or fear interacting with those they disagree with. The silent ones have awoken to the world around them, but they are stunted in knowing how to engage it well. The sad truth is that the church has failed more often than not to engage culturally controversial ideas out of love and with the persuasive power of the transcendentalists. But the failures of the church are to be expected to some extent. After all, the church is made up of sinners who make mistakes and misjudgments. But that is certainly not to say that these problems should occur. And the church should never be comfortable falling to extremes or silence. So is the church to give in to despair? By no means. Are there solutions to having civil conversations with difficult people and reclaim identity and community? By all means. There are quite a few methods for preparing to have civil conversations before conflict even begins. The most obvious and powerful method is prayer and reliance on the Holy Spirit. Trusting in one's own reason and strength guarantees that the attempt to discuss differences will be futile. But that is not to say that the church should refrain from learning about how to discuss these ideas more effectively. That would be absurd. God created us to pursue wisdom, truth, goodness, and beauty through His Word and His creation. Learning from others and their ideas, especially communication techniques based in psychology, can aid us greatly in pursuing and persuading those with whom we disagree. This leads to the discussion of Christian persuasion. Osgood makes an admirable case for pursuing persuasive abilities when he states that recovering the lost art of persuasion is urgent, timely, and supremely practical. But it is always an art, not a science. And it is not for cheap salespeople, but for genuine lovers of Jesus, and lovers of truth, beauty, and a knowledge that is more than facts or information. Now, there are many ways in which persuasive abilities can be cultivated, such as pursuing the discipline of rhetoric or learning how to tell a story. After all, people do not come to their views exclusively through reason, but also through emotion and experience. As Jonathan Haidt notes, the mind is a story processor, not necessarily a logic processor. This truth is key in learning how to navigate high conflict well. When faced with someone whose views are so plainly wrong, it is easy to shut down and become defensive. As Amanda Ripley advises, though, in these situations, what you can do is complicate the narrative and ask questions. Ask how the person came to their views. Truly listen to their story. To quote James 1:19, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Demonstrate courage by being uncomfortable in the face of an opinion that you think is wrong, but simultaneously seek to understand where that person is coming from. As Ripley stated, become comfortable with the gray. In order to make sure you're hearing the story behind their arguments correctly, an excellent tactic to use is looping. This is repeating their point back to them and asking if you represented it correctly. This works so brilliantly because it allows you to fully process what they are saying and builds trust for the person you are talking to. This has even proven to completely alter viewpoints, especially when the person comes to realize why they believe what they believe. Important views are culturally controversial for a reason. That is because they are emotionally charged and driven. When the church engages these issues, it is vital to humanize the person holding such views. This is transformative. No longer is the person's identity solely tied to that one idea. No, they are a complex individual who is emotionally vulnerable and worthy of love, dignity, and respect. If the church intentionally strives to see those it disagrees with as flawed sinners, but also valuable image bearers of God, it will begin to set a societal precedent. Christian psychologist Angela Sabat states that essential to the Christian perspective is the intrinsic value of persons. Christ specifically humanized those who were marginalized outgroups. Examples include the Samaritans, lepers, and tax collectors. Christianity combats dehumanization by extending the right of personhood to all humans. Yet, as she goes on to note, that is not easy to do, especially when one deals with an aggressor who has committed a severe harm. She follows this by saying, in such cases, another biblical concept, forgiveness, has been linked to many positive outcomes. Forgiveness is always possible for Christians, no matter the intensity of the conflict. As Corrie ten Boom so beautifully put it, forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. Christians themselves have experienced the unfathomable forgiveness of God, which should motivate them to bestow grace upon others when persuasion is impossible. Christians have the guidance of the Spirit, resources to cultivate skills of persuasion, and God-given abilities to humanize and forgive. These are the only viable solutions to creating a culture of civil conversations. But this will only happen if the church takes up the challenge of learning how to meet conflict with courage, curiosity, and compassion. Now, this argument would be one-sided if objections to the information were not also given. Perhaps the most pertinent objection is, doesn't engaging the world distract from the church's aim to uphold truth? First and foremost, the arguments presented are not saying that a passion for truth should be condemned. Rather, they are intended to shed light on the fact that when we use our passion for truth as a vessel for self-righteousness, we fall into the trap of critiquing other people without mercy. When we separate truth from goodness and beauty, it ceases to be truth. By seeking to uphold truth, but refraining from seeking to understand others' viewpoints, we actually condemn truth. And we fail to admit that sometimes we may not see it correctly ourselves. We hinder the truth from crossing barriers and prevent ourselves from loving fully and living in peace and harmony. We may not be able to be unified with everyone we disagree with, but we must strive to reach out to them and live in peace. So, what is to be done with the fact that the church has failed in addressing culturally controversial ideas? No one has engaged with conflict perfectly and out of complete love for his neighbor. But the church holds the key to having civil conversations and even civil disagreements. As redeemed image bearers of God, the members of the church are becoming more and more like Christ, who is the friend of sinners and who died out of sacrificial love for those same lost sinners. Who are we to say that we cannot interact with those we disagree with? Who are we to deny the Spirit's work in us when we faithfully pursue them? We are acting without justice, mercy, or humility if we choose not to demonstrate to the world what civil conversations can look like. The solution is not safe spaces, but nor is it silence in the face of sin and disagreement. The solution is for the church to actively engage with conflict and controversy well. The solution is more passionate discussions across difficult differences, fueled by humble, empathetic minds and forgiving hearts. As Jonathan Haidt exhorts, may we all argue as if we are right, but listen as if we are wrong. When addressing how Christians should respond to the ordeal between President Trump and Alec Baldwin, Tim Muehlhoff left his readers with a vital takeaway. Let us follow Jesus' example by rejecting today's argument culture. He said, when we are insulted and even hated for our seemingly intolerant beliefs, let us not give an insult for an insult, but a blessing. Perhaps such actions won't make the nightly news, but it just may help in engaging with perspective taking with the one who rejected his status to offer us an alternative to argument culture. Only when the church begins to engage with culturally controversial ideas while disagreeing charitably will it be fulfilling its calling to think critically and love abundantly. It will be replacing culture's conflicting definitions of identity with a singular definition grounded in God-given worth. In conversing well with others, the church will cultivate a culture of change, and it will look a lot like Christ.
Very good, Neidin. I feel like I have a lot of repenting to do. So the panel, I'm sure, has some great questions for you.
Neidin, well done. I have a few questions for you. I used to teach apologetics here. Used to. I taught my class then a famous quote by an apologist I highly respect, Greg Bonson. He said that apologetics, in large part, is to open the unbeliever's mind. But on the other hand, apologetics can function in such a way as to shut his mouth. Would you agree with Bonson that that would be a legitimate use of apologetics?
So you're saying would I agree that we need to shut people up?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think necessarily that's what I'm going for. I think we need to understand their viewpoint first. But granted, there are times when persuasion is impossible. And I think in those instances, what we need to do is just be concerned with how we're treating them. We can't control their behavior. But a posture of grace is far more valuable in those instances than just telling them to be quiet.
So, the argument, if you will, is an argument against argument culture, not arguing as such. Is that
Yes, that's correct.
So, if I'm understanding that correctly, I would be curious to know what you would think of another theologian, Dr. Michael Kruger at RTS, who teaches in his Gospels classes that if you read the Gospels closely, you find out that Jesus almost exclusively argues with people. If you turn basically to any page, you find him in some dispute, some argument. And sometimes he gets pretty angry. Sometimes he gets pretty mad. When do you think, given the fact that we're not perfect like Jesus is, when do you think it would be appropriate for a Christian to express anger in a discussion or an argument? And how do you think that that would play out?
Sure. Well, first, this might be a little bold of me, but I don't think that almost every interaction Jesus has were arguments. And I think in the cases of Pharisees and people like that who knew the truth, those were arguments because they knew the truth and they weren't lost. But oftentimes in Scripture, Jesus confronted those who were lost and misguided with grace and compassion. I think of the woman at the well and many others. And I think that's what I'm getting at here. If someone knows they're wrong and just doesn't want to admit that, sure, you need to rebuke them. But if they're just lost and they don't know what they're talking about and they really haven't thought through their ideas, which I think is more common than not, that's when you need to extend grace and talk through it with them.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is we often take for granted that they're already established. That's great. One last question, being the philosophy guy that I am. It seems to me that there's a tension between this idea of safe space, of you can't tell me, you can't talk about these things because I'm going to be offended, these sorts of things. But the idea of postmodern culture, relative truth, what do you think the church can do in particular to address that tension? Because those are two, I think, opposing claims. How do you think we can reveal that to the folks we're dealing with?
Yeah, I think that's difficult because we can't obviously infiltrate all of education, but what I would say is just in our interactions with people, no matter if they're in the church or not, we should be talking with them about things that are difficult and bring those ideas up and not be afraid of that, and just show that we are open to that, and I think that'll set a precedent, but obviously it starts small to build up. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
It's great to see you up there.
Thank
Standing.
you. Thank you.
It's a testimony to God's grace.
Absolutely.
I'm grateful to hear you present tonight. So, let's loop for a minute. I believe you said something to the effect of critiquing other people without mercy. Is that, I think I heard that appropriately, right?
Correctly. Yeah.
That's hopefully not what we're doing here. But, so, I want to kind of think through this practically, okay? This is an argument that's well suited to a Christian context. And I think most of us would agree that we have a posture that we have to assume as the church towards unbelievers and engaging in divisive subject, even with one another, because I don't even think within the church we really know how to do that well anymore. And that's really the point. The point is not, you're not taking your argument to an unsaved world and saying, the onus is on you to figure this out. You're saying, really,
it's inclusive of the church, yes.
We've got to figure this out. But how do we go about practically engaging with an unbelieving culture who feels this way? If our views are assumed to be bigoted and closed-minded, lacking love and compassion, what role does relationship play into cultural engagement if we really want to be effective in what you're arguing for?
Right. I think that's a great question, and that's largely why I did this whole paper, is because I was trying to figure out how to discuss difficult ideas with people. And I think a large majority of why I didn't know how to do it was I viewed everyone as a part of a group. And so I was hearing their ideas being thrown at me and being condemned for being intolerant and bigoted, like I said. And I wasn't really thinking about the person at hand. And I think when you break it down to an individual level, like you're saying with relationships, it becomes a lot more easy to discuss those ideas. Granted, you're going to have conflicts, and that's what I'm talking about. But I think when you break it down and you try to establish a relationship first, I mean, you could go straight into discussing these ideas with a random person, but I think first build a relationship and then show that you truly care about them and that you're not trying to do this just to discuss their ideas, but that you truly care about them and ask why they believe what they believe. And I think that opens a lot of doors. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no,
okay.
it does. And I think relationships important because so oftentimes these discussions take place transactionally where there's really no forethought. A lot of times it happens on social media and we beat one another up in a span of 30 seconds and we make a mess of the world and of our own Christian testimony. So I'm thinking about an issue that pops itself up a lot within our own community here in Charlotte. We have very active abortion clinics within our own town. Many families within this church and within the Greyfriars community are involved in abortion ministry. That is very high tension. And it's very raw because it takes place on the streets in front of those abortion mills. Within the thesis that you're arguing for, is that the best way for us to engage in those high tension moments? Don't think Westboro Baptist, think more in front of Latrobe, your preferred women's center on Latrobe Drive, where those are high tension situations, oftentimes where you meet protesters, people that feel very strongly against you. Is it better for Christians to avoid those sort of incubator moments where there's a flame that's just waiting for gasoline to be poured on it? Or is there a place for more of a abrupt, disruptive, for lack of a better word, in-your-face ministry for Christians when dealing with these culturally divisive issues?
So first up, I definitely applaud anyone who attempts to do that, and I think they're getting at exactly what I'm talking about, because I'm talking about situations in which high conflict is inevitable. But I think what they're tapping into is like emotional vulnerability in those moments, and I think that can be incredibly effective in persuading. Obviously, it won't be every time, sadly, but I don't think it's an either or. either. So I think that we can have those situations, and I definitely respect those people who do that. I need to get better at doing things like that myself. So, but I also think that building relationships with people in situations when it's not going to be quite as tense is also important. So I think both are valuable.
Very good word, Neidin. I can just personally say that I've seen you exemplify this in a lot of your relationships. I think that lends what you're saying about credibility. Also, is a testament to the Lord's work in you and the community.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
All right. Before I begin, I'd like to thank my audience for coming out here tonight. I really hope that you all find something worthwhile to take home. I'd also like to thank my advisor, Dr. Clark, for spending so much time explaining difficult concepts to me and taking my drafts as they came, no matter how drastically they changed. I'd also like to thank my parents for sticking with me in my topic, despite how crazy it sounds. Let's begin. I want you to imagine a place covered in nothing but red dirt and mountain ranges as far as the eye can see. The temperature remains well below 0 degrees, and no water or life is present. Giant dust storms stretch across miles and miles of land, and the reduced atmospheric pressure can destroy human lungs in less than a minute. Such a place exists in this universe. This place is 33.9 million miles away from the Earth, and it literally takes your breath away. This place is Mars. Sounds like a cheery place to live, right? As of right now, there are space agencies intent on reaching, exploring, and colonizing Mars. They believe that Mars will provide a solution for many of the problems that exist on Earth, and they believe that it will make progress and development easier for the future of mankind. Humanity has been fascinated with astronomy since the dawn of time. Mankind admired cosmic planets from afar, named them, studied them to better understand the universe, and discovered many of their secrets. When man went to the moon during the Apollo missions, they triumphed over the word impossible. While reaching the nearest heavenly body was a great achievement, the next obvious and possible conquest is to reach the nearest planet. By as early as 2030, space agencies around the globe aim to have astronauts walking on Mars' surface. For space experts, Mars is the foundation on which humanity can build an advanced society. For others, Mars represents what will be mankind's greatest achievement. In both cases, Mars represents something special. Space efforts to reach and colonize Mars emanated from a group of space programs such as SpaceX, Mars One, NASA, and Blue Origin. They each have different reasons for going to Mars, and each of them are making immediate efforts concerning their interest in Mars. NASA, for instance, is interested in exploring the Martian landscape and preparing for search and discovery missions. This includes having humans land on Mars, a spectacular feat in and of itself. Billionaire Elon Musk and his daring space crew at SpaceX claim that they not only want to land on Mars, but to colonize it. They argue that should the Earth fail for any reason, Mars is the best possible option for a secondary planet. Their immediate goal is to send scientists and professionals to live on Mars for extended periods of time to discover ways of living there indefinitely. While teams working at NASA, SpaceX, and other space agencies continue to gain traction on their path to Mars, more and more scholars and scientists are debating the potential effects that visiting Mars will bring. Admittingly, the concept of visiting and living on another planet is not what is in question. Whether 20 years from now or 100 years from now, these concepts will remain the same. but the question lies in the why people should visit and live on Mars. It is most likely that the push to Mars won't abate. Growing interest in Mars has only increased over the past few years. However, companies and governments invested in Mars exploration have suffered from being too discreet with their findings. Because they have been rather discreet, people have failed to care as much about the space program as they should. It is important that these efforts to explore and colonize Mars do not go unnoticed. Everyone is still waiting for that one giant leap for mankind. Mars is changing that, and in a couple of years, astronauts will have set foot on the Martian surface. Science fiction has often shown Martians to be aliens from a different planet. Nobody could have guessed that humans would become the first Martians. The pursuit of Mars colonization is a good thing. While there are many risks that are involved in space travel, money, and human lives, the benefits and solutions that Mars creates make it ideal for colonizing. It is my contention that Mars colonization should be pursued in order to promote the advancement of mankind because it has great potential for knowledge, science, and exploration. While there is little doubt that efforts to colonize Mars are underway, displaying motives behind them is equally important. If planetary exploration and colonization might exist someday, then the possible benefits and risks exist as well. Many people desire practical benefits, and contrary to popular belief, colonizing Mars has many practical benefits for modern society, both for the individual and the common good. When the United States attempted to go to the moon in the 1960s, they had no idea what to expect. No one had ever ventured beyond the Earth's atmosphere. The moon tempted humanity since they could look at it. All they had to figure out was how to put a man on top of a missile and launch him to the moon, preferably alive. Roger D. Lanius, senior curator of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, replied that the moon landing was one of the few things that everybody will be taught about the 20th century. He, like many others, recognized that the moon landing gave mankind a monument, one that generations can celebrate forever. For the people living in the 1960s, the moon landing addressed the need for leaving something for future generations. Now, Mars colonization and exploration can address our need to craft a monument to the ingenuity of our generation. The space agencies must address and present concrete value, but that doesn't take away from the intangible reasons that motivate humans. Humans need goals and motivations. It's what drives us to overcome obstacles and problems. These motivations can be incorporated using the value of hard work and the old can-do spirit. Without it, perseverance and dedication would slowly fade away. Space agencies must value hard work, and hard work develops the finest when focused towards a goal. Andrew Carnegie once said that goals are the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. And I believe Mars is that goal. Mars aims to join society together for the common good, and if it just so happens that the benefits from traveling to Mars do not appear until after a long while, it will still have been worth it. People are very frightened of starting big projects because they may not get to see the final result. 200 years ago, the forefathers of America could never imagine what the United States would accomplish or what it would become. They wrote the Constitution, set up the foundation for the United States, and they did it not because it benefited them immediately, but because of what they wanted to build. Look at the United States now. It is here in such a state as it is because of the sacrifice our forefathers made. What remains true is the fact that great leaders such as George Washington, Madison, Jefferson aren't alive today to see the great nation they helped start. That might be true of Mars. The generation living now might or might not get to see the fruits of its labor. But sometimes, the best part of doing something is not the final product. It's the journey that it took to get there. One of the obvious benefits of going to Mars is scientific discovery and exploration. These have supplied enough significance in and of themselves to be valued. Science builds skyscrapers, it discovers electricity, and allows people to send emails on tiny pieces of metal. Space has proven to be a vast resource of scientific information, and there are many scientific phenomena that have yet to be discovered or understood. Many people have risked life and limb for the sheer joy of discovering something new. It's part of what makes living worthwhile. People's natural, innate desire to explore and focus on the unknown is not just an added benefit, it's part of what makes us human. For the present generation, Mars represents the unknown. Scientific discovery and exploration combine to fulfill what this generation has been searching for, somewhere new. Long ago, Christopher Columbus sailed the Atlantic Ocean to explore new lands. His journey was fraught with risk, but it never stopped him from continuing his journey. Columbus knew that the knowledge, the glory, and upcoming success that he aimed for were present as well as the risk. He was willing to fail for something greater. History offers an interesting perspective, that Mars is to the new age of exploration as the Americas were to the last. And this generation's search for something greater, Mars can be as big a step for humanity as the discovery of the Americas was for past generations. A large part, and often the most significant benefit of Mars colonization, is the potential to discover groundbreaking technology. The exacting Martian environment challenges scientists to develop new technology and solve future problems. For these tests to run smoothly, scientists require enhanced technology, enhanced industry, and enhanced scientific knowledge, all of which scientists will need to develop as they continue to work through the details of the projects involved with Mars. Having been founded nearly 60 years ago, NASA has produced more technological benefits than any other space agency. NASA alone accounts for nearly 2,000 spin-offs in the fields of computer technology, environment and agriculture, health and medicine, public safety, transportation, recreation, industrial productivity, and more. Among other things, these developments have changed the way aerospace structures, commercial or military, are shaped and manufactured. These spin-offs and patented inventions have been and continue to change the way technology is developed and produced. As technological innovation promotes improved machinery, advancements in human health will also increase over time. Mars has a harsh effect on the human body, and space programs must learn more about the human body and different ways to protect it. For years, research in health and medicine has been greatly improved because of the new discoveries made by fixing space-related health obstacles. One of the most exciting inventions that has already been developed uniquely for the future of a Mars mission is an oxygen-creating instrument produced by MIT. This instrument, called MOXIE, is a specialized reverse fuel cell whose primary function is to consume electricity and produce oxygen on Mars. It will provide humans all the oxygen they need to live, and it will also provide liquid oxygen needed to burn rocket fuel for a return trip to Earth. MOXIE demonstrates the cornerstone of the mission to Mars, solving problems one invention at a time. Each invention will push people towards making Mars, and in turn the Earth, a better place to live. As a result of space exploration technology, other discoveries and technologies arise because of it are incredibly influential and beneficial. Space research and future Mars efforts result in new technology and health benefits that affect people in their everyday lives, whether it be the insoles in your shoes or the cordless tools kept in your garage. These practical benefits can be seen changing the way people live, and they will continue to change people's lives even more in the future. Now, let's talk money. Economics plays a huge role in Mars exploration and colonization. When it comes down to money, many people are very hesitant to give even a small bit, and for good reason. A poll created by the Pew Research Center concluded that the majority of Americans want people to go to Mars. They just don't think it's a good investment. The expansion of a Mars mission relies very heavily upon how it can return the huge investment needed to start it. Traveling to Mars and beyond doesn't mean handing NASA, Blue Origin, SpaceX, or any other space agency a blank check and not expecting anything in return. A mission to Mars does not come without financial risk, but it will include its own advantages. Entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Baz Lansdorp have all risked millions in the space industry, not because they disregard the risk, but because they recognize the profit they can make. And because these entrepreneurs have invested their own personal money, they will be more likely to work harder and be more invested in their own success. While this doesn't guarantee financial success, their support will bring missions to Mars closer to financial security. The biggest investment that space agencies make towards the economy is its dependence on a large and skillful workforce. The project to colonize Mars will require employing thousands of skilled workers, such as engineers and scientists. As of 2018, 72 different government space agencies and several private sector space agencies still operate. Space agencies around the world employ more than 150,000 highly skilled individuals, from aerospace engineering technicians to plasma physicists. Space careers include a universe of options. A continued growth in privatized space agencies will be very beneficial to creating new jobs, new industries, and encouraging education and the production of a skillful workforce. Another source of profit that could be found in Mars is its natural resources. Now, the entire planet is full of raw natural materials that have never been touched before. The most valuable resource discovered on the planet is deuterium, an extremely rare and expensive isotope on Earth. This natural gas is used in fusion reactors to create massive amounts of energy. 1 milliliter of the substance in liquid form could generate as much energy as 20 tons of coal. While the natural resources could be transported back to Earth for use, they could likewise be used to help sustain life on Mars. The benefit of natural resources could return financial investments and more in the future. As future attempts to colonize Mars continue, the science surrounding the topic is necessary to understand. If Mars is to be colonized, people should know why it should be colonized. The widespread benefits of going to Mars, such as advancement in technology, new scientific discoveries, and international cooperation, are all important arguments for why it is happening. With new technology stemming from Mars research, planes will be made safer, food will be grown more efficiently, and people will be given amazing opportunities to venture into space, something that never could have happened before. Considering the many challenges facing Mars exploration space travel, I understand that many people have developed different opinions. Space travel in general has always been regarded as expensive, risky, and unknown. As such, some people sympathize with the idea that the Earth should be top priority, and mankind should not colonize Mars until Earth's problems are solved. This is not really an argument against Mars colonization as much as it is an argument against Mars colonization now. However, this argument never addresses that Mars colonization should never happen, nor that the Earth will always have problems. The Earth is #1 priority because the entirety of mankind lives there. Focusing on the Earth and its problems will always remain. A mission to Mars might take a little attention away from the Earth's problems, but ultimately, the things learned from exploring Mars could help humanity steward the Earth better. However, it does not mean that a mission to Mars must wait until poverty and climate change issues are completely eliminated. The entire population of Earth, despite the best arguments for Mars, is not going to leave it as soon as a rocket ship lands on Mars. There will be plenty of people whose entire focus will rest on the future of Earth and its problems. People can rest assured that the Earth will remain top priority, even if a mission to Mars begins. Aside from prioritizing, I believe that the most challenging aspect of planetary exploration and setting up colonies on Mars is the ethics behind it. Christians are concerned that God might not support space exploration. God gives them clear instructions to feed the poor and take care of the sick, but obedience does not require planetary exploration. If men were really meant to go into space and beyond, wouldn't God have said something about it? I think it's important to say that the Bible does not go into much detail about whether or not mankind has been given dominion of space, but there are some relevant passages that could help point to a resolution. Psalm 8:6 states that mankind has been given dominion over the work of God's hands. And a few verses back, Psalm 8:3 states that the moon and the stars are said to be the work of God's fingers. This would suggest that man is free to roam the moon and the stars. Man has both a God-given desire to mandate and fill and subdue the earth. This endeavor has already led man to space. Exploring beyond the earth has improved life on earth and aligned with Christianity's historic pursuit of the common good. The Bible says that everything in God's creation, galaxies, planets, people, plants, animals, all things were created for God's glory. Spiritually speaking, humanity could glorify God just as effectively on Mars as it can on Earth. God is not limited by the bounds of the Earth's atmosphere. As it is impossible to say with complete assurance that space travel is fine, Christians should leave it into God's hands to decide whether man is right or wrong. God will be pleased that man has become intelligent enough to explore places other than the Earth. Just as God blessed Columbus and the people seeking religious freedom with the discovery of the New World, I hope that God may have plans for space exploration in the same way. Colonizing Mars is worth the effort, and no matter how difficult the undertaking or how many obstacles there are to overcome, mankind must pick itself back up and keep moving forward. Nothing worth having comes easy. Neil Armstrong proved to the world with his first step on the moon that his one giant leap for mankind was dependent on thousands of smaller steps that he and others took to get there. As mankind begins to take a few of the thousands of steps needed to colonize Mars, it does good to remember how far it has come. On September 12, 1962, 7 years before man landed on the moon, John F. Kennedy gave an inspiring speech reflecting his thoughts on traveling to the moon. He died only a year later, but his speech resonates to this day. He said, "Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why he wanted to climb it. He said, 'Because it is there.' Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask for God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. If man can land on the moon, he can definitely land on Mars. And given the reasons for doing so, the journey will be one of value. Next time Mars is viewed in a telescope or shown on the television, just give it a wing for the future."
Brogan, that was literally out of this world. I'm sure we've got some questions.
Okay, Brogan, well done. I actually don't have a firm conviction about this topic, but I will say no one wants to see people go to Mars more than I do. I am such a space nerd, and this topic fascinates me to no end. So I don't really know where I fall on the spectrum, but I'm curious. Depending on who you ask, Columbus, I know you mentioned Columbus, the Puritans when they came over and colonized in America, the Patriot fighters, and the list goes on, but those come to my mind. They operated under sort of a Christian framework in which they sought to Christianize the lands that they were going to be settling in. I know some would disagree that that was Columbus's motive, but I think we can agree, based on what he's written, that was, at least in some part, why he came over here, or why he at least left to seek out new lands. In other words, their intentions were honorable. In contrast, we have Genesis 11 that tells the story of the children of men who built the Tower of Babel, and what Scripture says is that they did it to build a name for themselves. And the Lord saw that as a form of idolatry, a form of stepping into a position that they were not supposed to be taking. So my question is, does this quest for colonization of Mars, does it fall into either of those categories, given what you said about, I'm trying to think of, I have it written down, that colonizing Mars would craft a monument to the ingenuity of our generation. So I'm wondering, does that fall into either of those categories?
Well, thank you for your question. I'm glad you brought it up because many people do think that maybe it's a bit man-honoring, and I think the real problem depends on who's going there. I really want and wish that good, strong Christian values would be applied to going and doing something like Mars. As for like making a monument to the ingenuity of our generation, I don't think there's anything bad with that as long as we do it for the right reasons. If it's completely man-honoring and totally apart from God, I don't think that, I don't know, because God allows lots of bad things to happen, but maybe He wouldn't make it possible for us if it wasn't totally that way.
Well, I do like what you said about our generation doing something that we might not see the fruit of until after we're gone. I thought, when I read that in the paper, I thought about all the cathedrals that are all over Europe, Notre Dame in particular, and how the builders of those cathedrals also were building it sort of to honor and to glorify the Lord, but they did it knowing they would never see the result. They would never see a finished product. They were doing something that they wouldn't ever see the fruition of. So, as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brogan, very well done. It sounds like you have really researched this well, and yet it sounds like perhaps you are the lone agent out here speaking of we should go to Mars, or did you find some others that are perhaps feeling the same way?
Oh, there's lots of people who think the same way I do. Maybe not using the same arguments, but they're super pumped and ready to go.
Okay, and do you have some details on some of those? How deep are they into this?
Like I could pull Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any of these people that have risked their own personal millions. They're both billionaires, and they've had to start from the bottom up. They're very devoted to their craft, and they've had to make space agencies and rocket ships and all these sorts of things using only the people that want to go to Mars. So of course, because they're risking their own millions of dollars, they're making sure that their research is very good, that the people that are donating money are getting something out of it. And so all their research is very finely tuned.
Yeah, good. Okay, and I think you're right. You know, God created all of this universe, and He didn't say we're just to remain on Earth, but He put us on Earth. But the guidance that I would hope these adventurers would look to would be from God as well. That is this the right thing to be doing? Yeah. But good job. I think you really did a great job there.
Well, as someone who starts to get queasy sitting in a pool on a noodle, the idea of being strapped to a missile and fired into space does not sound delightful to me. However, this is a super cool topic, and I'm grateful for your treatment of the argument and the thoughtfulness that you had to delve into a little bit to the Christian ethics of it all, which I think is where the questions start to come into play. If you haven't read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, I would encourage you to do so. He was a little bit of a space geek himself. But his treatment of two types of people who make their way into other worlds, I think is relevant to what we see. You have a Christian, or what turns out to be a Christian protagonist, and then you have a worldly antagonist who are both have competing interests in these spaces, and who bring both redemption and fallenness there with them. So I think about, to frame this question, I want you to think about the depravity of man, and even man's fallenness has been in existence for a long time, but even since man went to the moon 50 years ago, our world has been shaped by that event. Currently we have an Air Force Space Command charged with the administration of satellites that are used to guide precision, mass destruction-oriented instruments of war that can deliver mass casualties anywhere in the world. One of President Trump's arguments for the existence of the Space Force, which, man, if only that had been around. If they don't wear stormtrooper outfits, it'll be a real disappointment. But one of the arguments for a Space Force is that someone will militarily control outer space. And so if it's not us first, it will be someone else. One can make the argument that the only reason why there's been international cooperation as we've explored the moon it's been because there have been no resources, or very limited resources, to exploit there. But as we look at the resources in our own planet, and the nations that tend to benefit, or that tend to be most resource rich, we see perpetual conflict and thirst for power, striving for power. So assuming that Mars is as resource rich as some would advocate that it is, I think Elon Musk is a perfect example of fallenness. If we ever do get to Mars, I hope he goes and stays for a while. But who would control it? We've not demonstrated throughout history that we're capable of, as human beings, of truly operating under a unified system. We're broken people in that way, and we each seek our own good, including these private agencies. So who would control it? How do we not prevent this from just being a military endeavor to grab resources to prevent others from getting them? How do we ensure that it's a redemptive endeavor that truly brings people together and not just a resource grab, not unlike what we see happening in the Middle East and other parts of the world? Make sense?
Yes, it does. And I really like your question. Thank you for asking it. I think that's a great argument for why Christians need to be more involved in space programs. Because as of right now, whoever makes it to Mars first, it gets basically everything. Of course, countries can argue, they can debate about what lands are international and what pieces of Mars splits to where without even having touched it first. And yes, I mean, in the future, they could set up a military, like endeavor sort of thing, and totally like take it all over, not let anybody else get anything from it, if that's possible. But yeah, we need to make sure that the right people are landing on Mars. And I think in order to do that, we have to really get people to know that it's happening, to know that this is happening soon. and especially Christians, and help people who are going to this thing, like Elon Musk, help them to realize like the true value of going there and the benefits from a Christian perspective.
You don't have to convince me at all. My only question really is, if we want to build a community, if we want to colonize, particularly under a scheme of Christian ethics, surely we would need to send a pastor, right?
Obviously.
So would you write a letter of recommendation to go to Mars when we go?
Of course. As long as I get to go first.
Brogan, I will confess that before your thesis topic, I, unlike Anna, couldn't care less about Mars or outer space, and which is obviously a flaw. And you really have just reshaped my entire excitement about all of this, and I'm going to be very focused on what's going to happen. And I particularly like what you said in response to Anna's question about how we do need to be aware of the Babel idea, which is why Christians need to get excited about this and not just sit back and watch. So when you go to Mars, before you take Jim, take you with you.
Thank you all for coming. I'm excited and pleasure that y'all can be here with me. I just wanted to thank Mrs. Claxton, my senior thesis advisor. She has been more than just an advisor to me. She has been a second mom on campus for me, and I'm very grateful for Mrs. Claxton and her devotion to me through the whole process. I also want to thank my mom. She read through it many times and she helped me, and I appreciate her for her love and devotion that was shown through her work with me. And Mr. Johnson, I just want to thank you for your devotion to us and truly pushing me. It was not easy, I will admit. He pushed me because he wanted me to be a more polar person, and I'm grateful for that. Colored people don't like little black Sambo. Burn it. White people don't feel good about Uncle Tom's cabin. Burn it. Someone's written a book on tobacco and cancer of the lungs. The cigarette people are weeping. Burn the book. So says the chief firefighter in Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Set in a dystopian future, the people of Los Angeles were not permitted access to the philosophical ideas expressed in books. The officials of the city had burned the books. They were aware of the book's ability to offend the minorities and wished to remove the conflict that was expressed. Each book was burned because it exposed something controversial. They created conflict. But without these books, were the people better off? No. Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 demonstrates that burning conflict does not eradicate it. Conflict cannot be avoided. Many people have a negative view of conflict because they do not know how to appreciate the good that comes from conflict. Though some of the outcomes of conflict are not pleasant, oftentimes it has redeeming qualities. Our frustrations with conflict should be a compelling force to find the good within the seemingly bad aspects of this world. Conflict entered this world shortly after Adam and Eve were created. They wanted to be God, but God had said no. Not only is man in conflict with God, but also in conflict with his fellow man. Man to man, culture to culture, and nation to nation. Men have bickered as to who should be king, women have quarreled over the fashion of the day, and emperors have fought over domains. These kinds of conflict demonstrate that man will do anything to achieve his desires. James clearly reveals the heart of man. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Conflict is prevalent in many aspects of this world because of the sin that entered through the first man. For the purpose of my argument, a social conflict exists when two or more persons or groups manifest the belief that they have incompatible objectives. Different types of conflict can be seen in many aspects of life. Some are solely based on people forcefully wanting their ways, such as riots, which solely create unpleasant outcomes. Others are related to human relationships. But though there is much that can be said about many types of conflict, I will be addressing just two types of conflict: the conflict seen in war and the conflict in politics. I will be specifically addressing World War II. Many people encounter these two types of conflict regularly. The political strife and the conflicts of war are observed through the media daily. It is easy to become overwhelmed and exasperated. This is why it is important to have a view towards these conflicts that is not negative, but seeks to see the benefit that comes through these conflicts. The very definition of war implies conflict, a state of armed conflict between two different countries, which includes the topic. Why include the topic of war in my argument? It is because war is so prevalent. Countries have fought countries for thousands of years. When history is studied, what is the main focus? Why war? The world progresses, learns, and moves through war. Nations are wiped out, and other nations rise to the highest power. War is just how this world gets along. Each country is either trying to be the most powerful or just simply stay alive. But either way, war directs, drives, and determines our history. So why consider the implications of conflict and war specifically? Simply, conflict is embedded in all of world history. Because we see war in all of history, I believe it is important to change our negative and poor views of the conflict of war. Additionally, why examine the conflict in politics? The definition gives a foundation for viewing the conflict in politics. I will be referring to politics as the activity of striving to share power or striving to influence the distribution of power, either among states or among groups within a state. With these two areas of conflict defined, the purpose of examining conflict becomes clear. My contention is that there are redeeming benefits that can be seen in war and politics, which should inform our attitudes towards conflict. After a violent attack on Rodney King by police officers in 1992, the country of America exploded. In the end, King was severely injured, but not killed. But in response to this one man's suffering, 53 people died, and more than 2,000 were injured. America was experiencing the horrors of a country who could not simply adhere to the question, can't we all get along? In his book, War, What Is It Good For?, Ian Morris responds to this incident by saying, it is a question, a good question, can't we all get along? Which people have asked in ancient times too. Instead of working their way towards peace through the violent wasteland-making process of war, would they not just have agreed to come together to create larger organizations, drawn up rules, hand over tax funds to enforcements, and got along? Apparently not. To jaw is to better than to war, Winston Churchill once said. But in all archives of history, it is hard to find a single convincing evidence of case of people agreeing to come together in a larger society without being compelled to do so by violence, actual or feared. Men have bickered and gone to war countless times in history. Churchill was trying to argue that it is more beneficial to talk through our differences than fighting. But history shows that it doesn't work this way. The majority of the time that a country goes to war after they have seen this is their last option. Many times, war is just what two countries use to work through a certain situation. I will be looking specifically at the Second World War and showing the benefits that come from this war, though there are many similarities that can be seen throughout history in many other wars. The first benefit that the conflict in war is how war pushes this world to create new innovations. World War II forced America to progress as a whole nation. Jerry Friedman, the author of Strategic Inventions of World War II, explains that many of the technologies developed during World War II have had a lasting impact on our way of life today. They have changed not only the way war is conducted, but also the way we travel, work, communicate, and socialize. By the end of the Second World War, the rocket, the jet plane, computers, Enigma machine, a machine which creates encrypted messages, had all been invented. In addition, during the war, the medic team sought to produce new medicines. Alexander Fleming, a captain in the medical corps, witnessed many deaths due to infections. We now have penicillin, which has improved life and medical operations even beyond saving wounded men. This war promoted the importance and the need for these innovations. Furthermore, during the Normandy invasion, the Allies were more prepared to advance upon the Germans and France because of the innovations of the radar. Ron O'Connor, author of D-Day and the Wizard War, states that as the C-47s towed reinforcements into Normandy, the C-47s used a remarkable radar transportation system called Rebecca Eureka to find drop zones. The need for a radar was brought about because of war. Today, radar is not only used in war, but also to predict weather. In fact, radar allows for people to prepare for severe weather conditions, such as hurricanes and blizzards, making conditions safer. Rockets and radars are just two examples of how war promoted technological advances. A common proverb claims, "The necessity is the mother of invention." In this case, it was the concept of war that brought about the necessities for the great innovations having a lasting impact on societies today. In addition, the concept of war often advances a country's economy. World War II brought America out of the Great Depression. The factories began working again, and the unemployment rate dropped rapidly. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, the outbreak of war in Europe in 1939 transformed the position of American labor. The mass unemployment rate of the 30s swiftly melted away as the nation turned to arming and supplying Britain and the Soviet Union, along with building up its own military. By the end of Pearl Harbor, there was a shortage of skilled labor. The nation reached substantial full employment in 1942. Before World War II, this country was experiencing the worst economic depression it had ever had. This war then created a need for more employment, which radically pulled the economy out of depression and into an economic boom. Godwin claims that during the war, 17 new civilian jobs were created. Industrial productivity increased by 96%, and corporate profit after taxes doubled. This gut-wrenching, horrifying war would never have been wished upon America. But it is necessary to see the good that has come from this war. America's economy benefited greatly because of World War II. Ironically, the very conflict of war forces conflicting political parties to put aside their differences and come together. However, the very conflict within our political system has benefits of its own. Many are frustrated with the conflict in our political system. The two parties of this country seem to be at an impasse because we are so divided. But this conflict has been around since the inauguration of our country. The whole concept of two parties was created through the conflict of men. Many would respond to this conflict and suggest that it is unnecessary and rather unfruitful. However, this is not true. Washington and Hamilton are a clear picture of conflict. They did not see eye to eye and had their own opinions of how this country should be run. But they used their disagreements to create the documents for our country and help America progress as a nation. The Founding Fathers knew that in order to grow, there must be two differing parties. Madison spoke of the importance of having two parties in the first Federalist paper. It is of great importance in a republic not only to guard society against the oppression of its ruler, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. Different interests necessarily exist in different classes of citizens, If a majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the minority will be insecure. Because America has two parties, the chance of the minorities being undermined is less. Madison was aware of the potential harm that would arise if there was one governing party in this country. In order to counteract this, he suggested a second party. This would allow for different opinions to be heard and considered. Madison truly wanted a government that was for the people. In 1791, George Washington signed a bill chartering a national bank. The bill was passed with great opposition from James Madison. It was not that Madison disliked the concept of a national bank, but rather, Madison was objecting because a few years earlier, the Constitutional Convention had decided not to give the power to grant charters to Congress. Madison saw how Washington was falling into the influence of Alexander Hamilton, who mangled the definition of general welfare. Madison saw that nothing was holding Congress accountable to the laws that had been put in place. This concerned Madison greatly. He knew that opposition, conflict, was needed in order to hold those in governing positions in check. Consequently, Madison led the way in establishing an opposition party, the first in American history. Though Madison was encountered with great hostility, he still pushed for his party. He recognized the importance of having a second party. Political conflict goes all the way back to our founding fathers. The conflict within America with the two parties is necessary and brings about great good for our country. Furthermore, it would be simple if people did not have to encounter conflict in our voting process. It would be simpler if a supermajority was unified behind one candidate. By way of example, in Russia, though running against 9 other candidates for president, Vladimir Putin received 77% of the vote in the 2018 election. So it seems that Russia is not politically divided, with such a landslide victory for Putin. However, such influence and power can lead to corruption without a great opposing party to the leadership. For instance, according to the human rights organization Amnesty International, Russia's new criminal code expanded the definition of treason to turn virtually anyone who was a government critic into a traitor. A CBS News article published November 14, 2012 explains that under one of Putin's new laws, anyone possessing information deemed secret, whether a politician, a journalist, an environmentalist, or a union leader, could be potentially jailed for up to 20 years for espionage. After this law was passed, a traitor no longer needed to be accused of spying from an external entity. Now anyone who was a critic of the government could be deemed a traitor. This shows that though the country seemed unified in the backing of Putin, the lack of a two-party system led to corruption and oppression. A closer look into the lives of these Russians shows that their lives are not as utopian as they may seem. The people are oppressed by a government not held in check by necessary conflicting ideas. Now, a common view of America's political system is found in the words of Michael Copeland, who says, "The two-party system is destroying America. Democrats and Republicans are at a death match, and the American people are caught up in the middle." One might ask the question of this great political divide, how will this great conflict ever be resolved? As Copeland states, a recent Pew Research survey found that 36% of Republicans thought that liberal policies are a threat to the nation's well-being, and 27% of Democrats felt the same way about Republicans. America is in great conflict. This conflict is seemingly bad. Though disagreements are so prevalent in today's political system, there is still a necessity for this conflict. The country needs to see the necessity of the differences found in our two parties, which will then allow for more peaceable interactions. People approach the political sphere and assume that their opinion is of the highest importance. This then creates an attitude that is self-focused and not focused on the well-being of our country. While still holding to their views, people should take a step back and thoughtfully disagree disagree with one another. This will allow for opinions to be heard while still seeking the good of our country in a controlled manner. When disagreements are handled well, it causes people to appreciate our different opinions. In addition, many people say that there is nothing good in war. All war is horrific. The words of Robert Kaplan states that this in a true but gut-wrenching way. Some of the most terrifying moments of my life have been in the midst of conflict, with American Marines in Fallujah in 2004, and with armed banks in Sierra Leone in 1993. I stood next to mounds of dead Iranian soldiers, teenagers actually, during the Iran-Iraq War in 1984. The horrors of war is a reality I've experienced firsthand. Kaplan speaks of the horrors of war, which are truly inexpressible. Lives are torn apart, lives are ruined, lives are ended. People are appalled by war. Many claim that there is nothing that good that can come from the horrors of war. Many people see and even experience the wretchedness of war and see no good in this conflict. The pains of war must not be diminished, but people must pause before they disregard every aspect of war. We are so blinded by the pains of war that we never see the vast good that has come because of war. The same person who spoke of the horrors of war in the same sentence said, and yet an analysis must never give in to his or her emotions. He or she must view history with a heart of ice to find the patterns which others miss. Kaplan had experienced war firsthand. One can only actually know war if he is placed on the battlefield. So for Kaplan to still be able to disconnect his emotions, it makes it all the more powerful and compelling for others to have the same mindset as Kaplan. It is important to see the wretchedness of war while still being able to appreciate the good from war. I do agree that war is hell. I would never be able to see one of my brothers enter a war to then be killed. I understand slightly the frustration and the pain that we all encounter when addressing war. I would take war completely away if I could. However, this world is broken, and the death and sin has entered our world. We cannot escape the death and horror of war. And because of that, I'm calling us to change our bitterness towards war. We can still be saddened by its pains while still seeking to see the good. If we solely dwell on the pains of war, we will become discouraged. As I so often see in so many people, we are so discouraged with war because we do not seek to see the good within war. This world is filled with darkness, which shows up in every aspect of this world. To run from darkness is impossible. But Christ does not abandon this world. If this is true, then the light is still within our world. It is much easier to dwell on the brokenness because human nature is prone to darkness. But light has been given so that the good can be seen, even when man has saturated this world in darkness. A wise man learns from the past, and conflict fills so much of our past. So go and seek the good that has come from conflict. Knowing that the Lord can redeem every situation of conflict should cause people not to become discouraged with conflict. People should enter our political system with humility and appreciation for where it has brought America. When war is studied and observed, people should seek to see the good that has come from war. The children in our next generation should be raised with a mindset that acknowledges that we live in a broken world, filled with death, and yet long to see the good that has come out of the darkness. Nothing is gained when someone's attitude is negative towards conflict. Nothing. Though conflict is overwhelming, it has been redeemed by the Creator of this world. This world is not left in utter darkness by the grace of the Lord whose flame is perfect. The ultimate conflict, when man rebelled against God, was all a part of God's final plan. Before creation, God decided to design a world that would include conflict. His gracious plan of redemption was to save his people who of rebellion. Without this conflict, the mercy and the grace of God would never be known. Why did God ordain the ultimate conflict? He did so to make known the riches of his mercy upon the vessels of the riches of his mercy upon the vessels of his mercy, which he prepared to do so before glory.
Well, shoot, I guess I got more repenting to do now. Very good. I was feeling rather glum about the world situation coming into this room, but I feel rather cheery now.
Anne Marie, I have so many questions.
I knew you would.
You easily take the cake for the most provocative thesis. It's really hard to know where to begin. I wonder, is there a distinction to be made that benefits from war? I hesitate to call it conflict within politics. I know that question there. But it seems to me that maybe a distinction to be made between benefits coming despite or in spite of war, in spite of the evil being made, rather than as a direct consequence of conflict. Can you talk to me why it's not that way? Why is it not that paradigm? Why is it not good despite the conflict? Why is it good because, or in some measure due to the conflict?
Why is the conflict of war good? Or
The benefits.
the benefits that have come from war, why are they not good?
Why do you say that they come from conflict, therefore conflict should be celebrated in some measure, rather than the benefits come despite the conflict?
I do not believe that the conflict, especially war, should not be celebrated. Like I said, war is horrifying, and I think that we should, if we could, get rid of it, but we can't. And I think what I came to realize is that we can't escape war, like Jesus even referenced that war will take place before he returns. And because of that, I think it is important to see the good that has come. So there, almost in any war that you can find, granted not every war, but oftentimes you do find benefits that come from war.
So let's talk politics really quickly. I hesitate to call it conflict because I think what we really want, I think what Madison really wanted, wasn't necessarily conflict, but accountability. Accountability between two parties, making sure that there was not government overreach, tyranny, and those sorts of things. Why conflict?
I think that the conflict creates accountability. They had differing opinions, and that's conflict. If you had an opinion and I had an opinion, we would have something that created conflict between the two of us. And I think that Madison wanted to have different opinions, which would then create conflict, which would then hold them accountable.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, definitely the award for most provocative. But I applaud that. I mean, it's a thesis. We're supposed to feel a little icky at moments and uncomfortable. And I felt icky and uncomfortable. So congratulations. And I mean that in all sincerity. I'm appreciative of your willingness to tackle a difficult subject. And I think the word that we get hung up on is this idea of it being good. I've heard lots of people describe war as necessary because we live in a fallen world. And just cutting to the chase, I guess that's my hang-up and my question. As a believer, we can accept that war is necessary. We can see God's redemptive work through it. But why should we advocate that it is, in some respects, then good?
I don't, hopefully I wasn't conveying this, that I was saying that war is good, and so I'm not saying that war is good, but I can realize that it will take place, and so there are benefits that come from war, which is not in justified means, but I think oftentimes what I am responding to is the negative, and it makes sense that we have a negative view towards war because it is horrible, but I often just see discouragement in people because all we see is the negativity of the concept of war. So I was just wanting to respond and saying, is there any good? And if so, let's focus on the good, acknowledging that war is bad, but just see if there is any good that can come from war. And I think it's something that has come from it. It's not war itself is good, just the accompanying benefits that came through war.
So then the follow-up question is, are the benefits, are you arguing then that the benefits justify war?
No, I'm not arguing that the benefits justify war. I believe that there are benefits that come from war, but that does not justify war. It is still horrible, and I don't want war. But because war will happen, there's no way around it. What good can we see in it?
Feeling slightly less icky. So.
Amory, I remember throughout the whole year as you were working on this thesis, you kept bringing up the Joseph story, and how Joseph kind of decides to view things at the end of his life when he's talking to his brothers. How does that speak to some of these questions?
So Joseph responded to his brothers that they meant to forgive evil for good, but God meant to for good. What his brothers did to him was not good, and we would all agree on that, just as we would agree that war is not good. But God has redeemed war, just like he redeemed the actions of Joseph's brother, and I believe that the same can be said. So it's not like the reason that God meant what happened to Joseph for good justified the actions of his brother, but the Lord still redeemed the actions of his brother.
You did a great job. I was going to leave the really hard questions to the guys over here who love talking about war. I'm just going to bring it home a little bit and say that I will put your thesis on repeat tomorrow and the next day and the next when I'm breaking up wars between my 3 kids. I'm going to have a positive outlook on this, and I'm not going to have a negative outlook on it.
I'm glad. That's what I'm hoping. Positive. Yes.
Well, Emery, I think this is a testament to you and your character a little bit, that you're not afraid of conflict yourself. And you knew going in that this would be difficult. And it's a challenging thing. And you knew that the Lord would redeem that for you and for us. And I think I'm just very appreciative of it because I do tend to get pretty glum, particularly with just the political landscape. And to be encouraged that historically that's kind of why we're American. So very good.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm grateful for everyone being here tonight, and I wanted to say a few thank yous. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Johnson for teaching the class, for Justin Rosser for being my great senior thesis advisor, who did not agree with me, who told me at the beginning that he would not agree with me. I wanted to thank my cousin Lorian, who read my paper and caught some errors that really should be fixed. And I'm very glad she caught them before I turned it in. And I also wanted to thank my parents, who were invaluable. Mom read my paper over and over. She didn't hesitate to do that for me, and she gave me some great, insightful comments. And then when she was done, she said, "John, I can't read this anymore." And it was Dad's turn. And Dad read it many times for me too. And it wouldn't be the paper it was without Dad. So thank you for all of that. So I'll begin. Americans love convenience. We love things like automated vacuums and automated coffee machines and stress-free online shopping. But we also demand convenience in one other thing. We demand convenience in our food. Fast food restaurants line our streets, with companies like Chick-fil-A owning over 2,000 locations in the United States alone. Restaurants offer online ordering so we can zip in and zip out even faster, and even coffee shops offer packed drive-thrus. The problem comes when this convenience, this desire for convenience, leads to the dominance of industrial giants in our food system. For example, companies like Tyson and Monsanto, which make components of industrially processed food, both made millions in the past year. Of course, these profits do not pose a problem. What poses the problem is when our desire for convenience leads to the demanding of products that can sit on the shelf forever without expiring, and that means that companies can't use traditional ingredients. This has led to the evolution of a food system that offers copious calories, but food that lacks substantial nutrients. Our desire for convenience has blinded us to our need for nutrition, but we need to know where our food comes from and what it contains. We need to be able to select healthy, fresh food to care for our bodies. The time has come for us to take responsibility for our diet by selecting the best ingredients to care for our bodies. And today, I contend that we need to reduce industrially processed food in our diet and replace it with whole, natural, well-sourced ingredients. To do this, I'd like to split my topic up into 3 parts. First, why food is important. Second, the dangers of our industrial food system. And third, how we can escape our industrial food system. As one of the largest factors in our health, our diet matters. Our bodies contain hundreds of biological cycles, all working together in unison to keep us happy and healthy. But in order to function, our bodies need a variety of nutrients, and most of those come from our diet. For example, omega-3s are a type of essential fatty acid, one that our body cannot make, but must get from its diet. Omega-3s have been shown to boost brain development, to reduce inflammation in the body, to reduce your risk of cardiac disease, and new studies are even showing that it could reduce your rate of cancer. We've seen for a long time that vitamin C can prevent deficiencies like scurvy, and we know that dietary calcium can help fortify the bones. So obviously our diet is about more than satisfying our taste buds. It's about optimal health. And the impact on our health is enormous. We can actually treat diseases sometimes with our diet, like anemia, which is a deficiency in iron. We can feed that person more iron-rich foods like leafy green vegetables and red meats. Or some people actually treat epilepsy, sometimes even more efficiently or even better than with medicine. They treat it with a ketogenic diet. So it's obvious, I'm not trying to dissuade you from using medicine and to place it in diet. But I just wanted to prove that it's important, that diet has a tremendous influence on your health. But the problem is that health isn't usually our first consideration when we go to the grocery store. It's convenience and ease. And that has led to problems in our health. And that has led to the development of a food system that offers problems that will express themselves in our health. The problems begin on the farm. Maybe the word farm for you makes you think of a peaceful red barn and green pastures and a white fence and happy animals. But the reality is that the face of modern agriculture is not that. It's factory. It's a factory farm. For animals, this means a highly industrialized production center. Chickens are raised in dark barns. They're bred to have extraordinary amounts of white meat, and their organs cannot keep up. And that means that they can only take a few steps without falling over. Cows and pigs are raised on huge factory farms called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. And then there's the case of dairy cows, which are brought up in barns and are perpetually pregnant until their bodies simply wear out. The problem happens when we take these animals, which are certainly not designed to live in these situations, and place them there, because it alters their habitat and it damages their health and therefore the health of the consumer. Take, for instance, the case of cattle. Cattle naturally eat grass. Most people know that. But the face of agriculture is a concentrated animal feeding operation. And that means that on that grassless, muddy lot, that we dump corn into their manger. Corn is great in the eyes of an industrial company for fattening cattle for two reasons. First of all, it fattens the cattle quickly. And second of all, corn's really cheap in America. But the problem comes because cows aren't naturally designed to eat corn. And when you feed them a grain-based diet, it develops a condition inside them called grain acidosis, which means that their gut becomes unnaturally acidic. And then we have a problem with the bacteria in the cattle's gut. The bacteria Escherichia coli, or E. coli, is a bacteria that normally lives in the gut of cattle and normally doesn't harm people. But the problem happens when the cow's gut becomes unnaturally acidic. The bacteria adapt to survive the acid. That means that when this infected cow gets butchered and we eat its meat, which isn't always perfectly cooked in a fast food restaurant, we run the risk of ingesting this bacteria. And this bacteria, when it's evolved to survive acid, can survive our stomach acid and cause death by kidney failure in us. To treat these diseases, companies seek to use antibiotics. But these antibiotics are harmful for two reasons. One, bacteria are obviously able to adapt, and one of the things they are notoriously able to do is adapt to and be immune to antibiotics. So that in theory, by overfeeding antibiotics to our animals, we could breed invincible superbacteria. But the second effect is perhaps even more serious right now, because it affects us right now. It is the fact that the antibiotics in our meat can affect our guts, and our guts are extremely important to our health. Studies have shown that messing with our gut biome can increase our risk of cardiovascular disease and kidney disease, and it can also lead to a deficiency in the right bacteria, making the right products in our colons, which can lead us open to colon cancer. But it's also interesting because a rising degree of research is showing that your gut can influence even more than just what's in your stomach. It can influence your brain. And so your bacteria, if you feed it these antibiotics and reset your gut biome, you could be a candidate for getting disease like Alzheimer's or autism or ADHD. So it's obvious that our production methods for animals are boosting production, but at the cost of our health. But animals are only half the picture. Part of the picture is plants. And unfortunately, farmers have turned to a disturbing solution. They have always faced problems from profit-destroying pests. But today they turn to modern organophosphate chemicals. These chemicals were developed after World War II from the same chemicals that were used in chemical warfare. And so they have the same mechanism as nerve gases. This means that to kill their intended victims, it paralyzes and suffocates them by attacking their nervous system. This is extremely effective for the pests, but also for any humans who get in the way. Pesticides pose a significant risk to our health. Studies have shown that cancer patients' rates of cancer and their exposure to pesticides are directly correlated. And also, we know that pesticides don't just stay in the field where they're sprayed. They can leak into our water system. In fact, a study by the National Center for Biotechnology Information showed that in most state samples, the detection rate for herbicides and pesticides in both raw and finished water exceeded 67%. This is in our tap water, and it particularly threatens the young among us because their immune systems are weaker, and they ingest more pesticides relative to their mass because they're smaller. So obviously plants, the way we produce plants, is also flawed. But it's not just how we raise or grow our food that matters, it's also what we do with the raw ingredients. And unfortunately, what we do with our raw ingredients introduces harmful chemicals into our body. One thing that we introduce is oxidized fats. These oxidized fats come from overheating certain oils, and this is particularly prevalent when we fry our food. This could be French fries, or fried fish, or fried chicken. But this leads to deposition of calcium on the arterial walls, which can lead to atherosclerosis, or heart attack, or even instant death, depending on how much you have in your arteries. But perhaps even a more serious problem is sugar. We love sugar as Americans. It dominates our diet. And maybe sometimes it's refined sugar, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it takes the form of high fructose corn syrup, or artificial sweeteners, such as saccharin or aspartame, which both come from petroleum products, just like tar and gasoline. These sweeteners can cause problems in our body like weight gain, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. And the problem is also that these sugars are highly addictive. A study done on animals to examine the addiction of sugar found that rats developed a full-blown addiction to sugar, complete with withdrawal symptoms, when it was taken away from their diet. And when half of America consumes a daily soda, we cannot underestimate sugar addiction. Clearly, our industrial system is wrought with flaws, and it is endangering us now and in the future. And it may seem daunting to escape, given that it's so huge, our industrial food system. But it's not necessarily. In fact, we live in an age when it's easier than ever to source our food elsewhere. And I wanted to talk to you about how we can do that. The first thing I would suggest is read an ingredients list. It is all too easy to pull up a box off the shelf based on the name brand. But I encourage you to flip it over. Anything that's in a box, flip it over and look at the ingredients list. It'll show you what's on there, and I encourage you to avoid enriched flours, artificial ingredients, artificial flavors. Even if they're labeled natural, they're artificial. I encourage you to avoid artificial preservatives and food colorings. Also, try to get away from packaged foods and seek to replace them with whole foods, which are straight from the earth, unrefined products like a pepper or a grape, something that hasn't been broken down and reconstituted. Generally, you'll find more whole foods on the perimeter of a grocery store, while the processed items will be in the middle. So that'll help you navigate this supermarket. When you're sourcing your food, you should also consider where your food actually comes from. And there's about 3 places where we can get it. There's conventional food, which obviously contain pesticides or hormones or antibiotics. There's also organic food. Organic food is highly regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The regulation in the USDA states that organic farmers cannot use antibiotics or hormones or pesticides or genetically modified organisms. They can only use certified organic fertilizers. As for the organic animals, they have to raise them with organic feed, and they have to have access to their natural habitat. So it gives you a level of protection. And then, of course, there's local food, which is pretty self-evident. It comes from area farms, typically from small family-owned operations. These may or may not be organic, so it takes a little investigating of the individual farm to look. Sometimes the organic label is a little bit cost prohibitive, so it pays to ask the farmer how they raise their food. But local food offers the chief advantage that it's very, very fresh. It didn't endure a cross-continental truck ride from California. It was grown right on your doorstep, pretty much. Now, it's obvious, not everybody has a ton of money to just throw liberally at great food. And so, conventional food can offer a good option. To avoid the pesticides in produce, you might seek out the Environmental Working Group, which is a nonprofit, independent nonprofit group of scientists that publishes 2 lists every year, one called the Dirty Dozen and one called the Clean 15, and it ranks most produce by pesticide content from bad to worse, and it would help you evaluate what you should buy organically and what you should buy conventionally. For example, spinach and strawberries are very highly contaminated with pesticides, and you should seek to buy them organically. But an avocado is very free from pesticides, so it would be perfectly fine to buy those conventionally and cheaply. If you do need to buy, organically, consider buying in bulk. You can do that fairly easily. In fact, here in Charlotte, there's this farm called Creekside Farms, which sells you meat. They will say half a cow at a time for $4.50 a pound, and that would give you ground beef and skirt steaks. It's all in the cow. Then there's also a community-supported agriculture endeavor, which is a local farmer. You would pay a membership fee to this farm, and you would get bulk fresh vegetables every week. And the advantage of this is sometimes they'll let you work on the farm in exchange for a lower fee. The advantage of local food is you know exactly where your food comes from. You buy it from a farmer and not a blank supermarket shelf, and it tends to be more nutrient dense because it was allowed to ripen on the vine longer, and it's fresher, and it will have absorbed more flavors and natural sugars that make it taste so good on the vine. And then there's, of course, you can grow your own food. It's not very hard. You put a seed in the dirt and you water it, and it comes up eventually. I've done that with mixed success. Mom's great. But if you think you need a backyard, a huge backyard, I think you can, because you can grow things in small pots and on windowsills. You can actually buy frames that hang vertically in windows and allow you to take advantage of vertical space in your small apartment. And this allows you to know exactly what's in your food. You know whether it's been sprayed with pesticides, hopefully not, if you're growing it yourself. And it could also offer an excellent educational opportunity for kids who may not know where their food comes from. It would be a great way to do that. If you don't have the space or you want to kind of participate with other people, you could join a community garden and do it with other like-minded people. Now, some people might doubt the viability for a large population to eat so well, especially with our huge population, that is over 328 million inhabitants right now. And the answer is, we can't. Not right now. Not with our current infrastructure. We would have to completely restructure it. But I think that we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to confront our current system. And here's why. Our current system is not sustainable. First of all, we practice something called monoculture. Monoculture is a big word that means we grow the same thing or raise the same thing on the same land over and over and over again. But that depletes our ground. Let's take corn, for instance. Corn is a staple of the American diet. If you turn over a packaged food, 10 to 1, you'll find a corn product in it. But corn needs a lot of nitrogen to grow. Well, the problem comes when we grow corn on the same field year after year. It deprives that land of its nitrogen. And so you have the problem that your corn either won't grow or it won't have as much nutrients to soak the actual food. So even though you'll still pay the same price for your corn, you won't get as many nutrients. Farmers seek to remedy this problem by introducing nitrogen-rich fertilizers back into the soil. But the problem is these fertilizers don't stay on the field. They seep into our water system, and excess nitrogen can hurt our bodies by inhibiting its ability to transport oxygen. In fact, in Nebraska, which is heavy corn country, counties have to release blue baby warnings, which warn parents not to feed tap water to their young children because there is so much nitrogen in the water. But this is not only not supportable ecologically, but it's not supportable economically because we subsidize our corn production. The way that subsidies work in our country is that the government guarantees the market price of corn. A farmer will go take his corn to the grain dealer, and if he doesn't get the market price, the government will reimburse him the difference. But that means that we have a system that encourages the farmer to overproduce. And that means that the price of corn, because we have so much corn, falls, which means that the price of sustaining these subsidies is only increasing. And this is a huge problem economically for us, and it proves that our system is bankrupting us both ecologically and economically, and is therefore not sustainable. Now, will a good diet prevent all sorts of disease in you, always? No. And will a refined, processed diet guarantee a quick death or a terrible disease? No. But it's just like texting while driving. It won't guarantee an accident. but it stacks the odds in your favor to have a great diet. We can always take another pill to offset the consequences of our diet. But that brings added cost at a time when health care costs in our country are skyrocketing. And it also brings side effects of its own. If the diet is causing the problems, then why not change the diet instead of medicating it? Now, doing this sort of thing and trying to sort out the best ingredients and sourcing out the best ingredients, it does sacrifice a little convenience. But it allows you to know exactly what's in your food. And at a time when convenience food compresses the time that it takes to prepare and enjoy a meal, preparing your own meal allows for meaningful family time. Some of the best memories you may have with your children could be in the kitchen. And great conversations stem over food. Eating is a social act. So, how should you change your diet? Well, I suggest one thing. I suggest setting a goal. I don't know what your goal would be, but I have a suggestion. You could try it. You could pick the top 5 refined foods in your diet and try to eliminate them. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of your favorite foods. If you like macaroni and cheese, ditch the box and make it with real pasta and real cheese. But realize that you could also start to learn to make new things out of new fruits and vegetables. It's very enjoyable to sit down in the kitchen and try something new. And I would also encourage you to journal your dietary journey. And I would say this because it allows you to see the tremendous influence your diet can have on your health. Do you feel more alert? Have you lost weight? But don't just look for changes in yourself, but also in your family. Raising our children with good values regarding food teaches them the value of good food, and it teaches them to treasure it. And they will pass their good dietary habits to their children, who will pass it to their children. So our diet today can influence generations to come. So I urge you, take your diet into your own hands. Seek out fresh ingredients. Avoid industrial processed food. Enjoy preparing fresh, nourishing meals with your family. As Michael Pollan says, we would do well to go backward, or perhaps just forward, to a time and a place where the gathering and the preparing and the enjoying of food were closer to the center of a well-lived life. Thank you.
Well, John, I gotta admit, this topic was difficult to swallow. But it seems like a healthy perspective.
All right. Well, you did an awesome job, John. And this is really helpful to your friend and pastor who eats terribly. Like an elementary schooler still. And so I really appreciate it. It's going to help me, so thank you. So I have 2 questions for you. One is, one of the things, so you just did, so they're questions and they're going to sound a little critical, but you just did an awesome job. I'm really blown away by the maturity of it and the content of it, so, and the 20-something sources, and this paper's really excellent. So, first question is, in your paper and in your talk, there's some things that you kind of speak of as negative, just in a very common sense way. Like, we all know they're bad, like GMO, genetically modified things, and pesticides, and chemical fertilizers, and antibiotics, but I wanted to give you a chance to show your knowledge of the other side of things. So, why these things were used in the first place? What are the benefits? Because it's not, we can't just say that it's only greedy capitalists saying, I want to poison the children, and but what are some of the reasons that some of these things are used? What are some of the positive things? You know, the flip side, if somebody were to say, no, but I have a farm, and this is why I do these things. Like, what are some of the things? And if you want, you could pick a specific one of these things, or a couple one of these things, like GMOs, pesticides, chemical fertilizers, antibiotics, things like that. So I'll let you take that.
I think, I think antibiotics obviously have protected us, are continuing to some degree to protect us against the pathogens that arise in our industrial food system. And things like hormones or pesticides increase our yield, or in the case of pesticides, our net yields, due to loss from pests. That boosts our agricultural production. I recognize that those are good things. I do see the value of antibiotics, and I do see the value of trying to boost our production. My only thought on that is that I think that we have a problem with thinking we need so much production, because the EPA actually says that we waste, they have a statistic on their website, that Americans waste a third of their food. So I'm actually curious, I think that would be a very interesting research topic, to see, do we actually need that much more production? Or could we survive without those things, since we waste so much food? Could we cut back our waste and grow less and be able to grow healthier? In the case of antibiotics, I think that that is an industrial solution to a problem that is caused industrially. So I see the benefit of using antibiotics to prevent disease in the consumer, but I also think that if we went back, and instead of just medicating the end result, if we went back and examined the process of where we are, and if we went back and sought to see the problems in the process that led to a bad end result, and sought to work there, I think that it would be a much better solution than simply developing an industrial solution for the end result of something that was caused by the industry itself.
Thank you, that's very thoughtful. One more question. Just thinking, Greyfriars being a Christian school and thinking theologically, I was wondering about if you could tie this just to anything in the Bible, anything about God's commands and His imperatives and how He wants us to live our lives, just some of the things you've talked about in your paper and how they would be pleasing to God, and just tie it to some theology, some of the positive points of what you said.
I think it would come down to two things. I think one thing would be that our bodies, we're told, are temples of the living God, and I think it's very important to keep our temples quite working and well. And I think that picking a good diet that would keep our temple, figures of being clean and well run, I think that's a very honorable thing to pursue. I also think that it comes to stewarding our earth very well. I think that the command to take dominion of the earth, I think that using the processes we do is taking dominion in a perverse way. I think instead of working with what God has given us and seeking to steward that well, I think with our production methods, we're changing the way that God designed it, and I don't think that's good stewardship. And so I think because of the concept of stewardship for God, I think that this topic is important in that way.
Those are good answers.
Okay, well, I just have, I've got two comments and then a quick question, which sort of has already been answered. But number one, I feel really, really bad that my children ate McDonald's for dinner tonight because of, and I'm going to blame it on my mom and not me. So I feel really bad that they ate McDonald's for dinner. My second comment is, if you wonder where the Greyfriars went, it's because my husband has nobly decided to move us to, a farm in Nebraska after this presentation to be the ones who butcher cows and kill our own chickens and all the rest. You are preaching to the choir here, and by choir I mean this guy right here. My question is, and like I said, you've kind of already answered this, what does it look like to practice good stewardship in our killing of animals for the purpose of meat? So you talked a lot about the way the poor stewardship of butchering the cows and the all of the genetically modified antibiotics that you feed them, and sort of speed growing chickens and all that stuff, and how that's the implication, of course, is that that is not good stewardship of the animals. If they're going to die anyways, what does it look like to be good stewards of that whole process?
I think the best way to tackle that would be, I think we need to value them as gifts and not take them for granted. I think it's easy for us to, in this world of lots and lots of food, you go to the supermarket and I guarantee you're going to find something you can eat in there. It's not as if the shelves are empty, and I think it's easy to take that for granted. We're also one of the largest meat-demanding cultures. We love our meat. I love my meat. I love steak. But I think that the degree to which we crave it has led us to overproduce it. So I think part of the stewardship would be in recognizing it as a gift and not as a granted, just something to take for granted, and to treat it well in that way. Not to try to sort of maximize a gift, but to enjoy it. But I think another thing would be to actually eat less, for example, of meat. Ultimately, if we were to go to a grass-fed, more naturally raised meat, we would have to eat less because we just don't have the space to prairie raise all these animals for 328 million people. So I think those would be two ways that you could kind of view the stewardship of raising animals.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because you mentioned Michael Pollan, and that's sort of his thing too, is, I don't remember how many meals he said to try to eliminate meat from your diet, and increase the amount of fruits and vegetables that you eat. So I'm sure he was a good resource for you. I know you quoted him, but thank you. So well done.
Well, we're going to keep clapping. But I have a question for you. You are preaching to the choir. We are currently looking for property wherever the good Lord will give it to us to start up the CSA process. So glad you mentioned that. But outside of your topic, I just want to say, tremendous job presenting. Would you like to know how many times you look down at your paper?
Sure.
13 in 20 minutes. That is phenomenal. That comes with a lot of hard work and practice, and probably with a whole lot of mom and dad's ears listening to practice presentations. So whoever that was, way to go. Great job on your presentation. So this is sympathetic to you. I brought my little Farm Strong hat here. This question, but I want to talk. Let's just talk shop here for a minute. Let's troubleshoot, okay? I take a little bit of an issue with the organic element here, because you didn't have time to share in your presentation tonight about the politics of mass agriculture in the U.S. and the legislation that comes with lobbyist groups and money, sugar subsidies, all down the line. But as I've looked at the per acre cost of organic produce versus locally grown produce, the cost difference is significant when you talk about net profit per acre, because ultimately if you're going to have people produce this food, it's got to make money. And people have got to be able to make a living wage. And even in really cool operations like the Elma C. Lomax Incubator Farm in Cabarrus County, which is kind of like the Silicon Valley of organic farmers, it's still subsidized by the government. So I think you would argue that it's best for us over time to wean ourselves from a politically subsidized food market, because ultimately that's subject to the power of the purse, which means the big players like the Monsantos out there are going to win. So do you think that there's merit to, what's your perspective on USDA, FDA, the local growers going through the organic certification process as opposed to just growing locally and making sure they're communicating well about what's in the food? Because I've heard lots of farmers say, organic is just a marketing tool. You still don't know what's in your food because the definition of organic changes from administration to administration.
I don't actually think that we necessarily need to get away totally from government subsidies, but I think voting with our dollar and with our votes, our actual ballots, might help us transition our government from subsidizing what we do to subsidizing the better crops, a wider variety of crops. I do think that we should switch to smaller farms because we have the greater accountability. Organic is not perfect, and it does, you could turn over an organic package and you'll find even if it's from organic corn, you'll still find oxidized oils in it, and you'll still find preservative elements in it. So I think that ultimately, I think that small farmers, I realize that it's very cost prohibitive for small farmers to be certified organic. So I think personally that the accountability that a small farmer should be from his consumer, who should be able to come to his farm and see, oh, there's the pen where my hog is. Like, that's where my bacon's coming from. Or there's my broccoli that's on my dinner table tonight. I think that's the accountability that ultimately matters. And I think if we had that kind of accountability in our large farm system today, that it wouldn't be the large farm system we have today. And so I think that I like the fact that the government is trying to protect us. But I think that some of that would be alleviated if the consumer had more authority to be able to, more ability to be able to kind of referee his own food.
John, I was hoping to go first because while Michael here is sympathetic, I'm highly skeptical. I was hoping to take up the entire time of questions. Sadly, I'm last. My wife is very much sympathetic to everything you've said. She's asked me to read Michael Pollan's food rules. It's a sense of pride I have yet to do so. I had Chick-fil-A on the way here. One of the biggest reasons I'm not convinced is because two things are happening that I'm concerned about. I'm only 20 years old, you're 17, 18. You should be concerned about this too. I'm not going to draw Social Security. I'm not going to draw retirement from my own denomination. I'm a minister. I'm not going to draw retirement from their fund right now because those people are still alive. They're still living, and they're living to record ages. Life expectancy is growing. That seems to me to be a problem for your thesis. That seems to me to indicate that, dare I say, doomsday food advice of you're going to die from heart disease, you're going to die from these sorts of things. I think that's true. But we're also seeing an explosion of people living longer. What do you see the correlation there, if any, and how would you respond?
I would see the problem as kind of being in two parts. I think that the diet and the medicine are kind of separate in that issue. I think that part of what it is that is leading to, I think that there are two things that help lead you to have a longer life. I think you could have the better diet. But I also think that one thing that is a factor that is helping to kind of make an argument against what I was saying is the fact that we do have medicine that is allowing us to live longer. So I think that the medicine that we have today is allowing us to survive on our refined diet for longer. But I think that the quality of life is suffering. I don't think it's always about the longevity. And I think it's also about the quality of the life. And I think that if you are taking 20 pills every morning, or if you're hooked up to an IV to try to get your, whatever vitamins and minerals you need, I think that that's an important consideration too, is not just how long you're living, but how you're living. Because I think that that's kind of important to consider. So I think that part of the reason that people are living longer is not because the diet we have is so great, but because the medicine we have is allowing us to stay alive.
job. And what a great segue into eating. John didn't check all of these to make sure that they're approved, but I'm sure they are, and very healthy. This was a really good time, but let's give them one more round of applause. Let me pray and bless the food. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your goodness. We thank you for all the things that you teach us and the way that you challenge us, particularly you challenge us this night through these 4 young people who love you and love truth and obviously love us. Father, we thank you for this food that we're about to eat, and we pray that you bless our fellowship and bless our right home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.